My mom's siblings, what you might call this, in and out of the marriage of my grandfather and my grandmother, were simpletons when it came to their fashion sense. My uncle did not drive around in these streets with elaborate cars, neither with like a designer clothes. Neither did his wife roam around with like expensive perfumes and mink coats and shopping sprees after walking up and down Hollywood Boulevard like you, Julia Roberts and Pretty Woman. No one in my family is like that. My family, hayatalaga fashion, is very high end. It's just my family. It's just us. Why? Because of my dad. Came from family Abahumi on his side. His mom squandered the wealth of the dad on alcohol after the father passed away. So my grandfather on my dad's side was a wealthy man. That was the one that was responsible, while the wife is the one that became the alcoholic, squandered the wealth and made my dad very mad. My dad was bitter at his mom by the time she died because he blamed her for uglasegelwa. He gave family wealth. But why my father even became a solicitor, an advocate, a lawyer, was because he was from that kind of family where it is that you can go in those days, that was before the days or when apartheid was out there wreaking havoc, saying that black people cannot study at like Wits, at this, at that. My father was among the first black children to be admitted into universities only for white people. And at some point he used to be a law lecturer at, listen to this, Wits University. That's my dad, right? So he studied law because his family was able to pay for law school. My dad's family was able, and my dad also not only was a solicitor, not only was a lawyer, right? He came from wealth, so unatseba expensive lifestyle, lama lai. He came from the Blasies though, right? Farm boy type thing. But nonetheless, when he was actually khattering the streets of Josie Maboneng, all that jazz, Botswana, all those, there was a time when South Africa, Botswana was part of us, and so too was Lesotho, right? There was a time when there was one country, so my dad had just been in and out in Jefela, Ingati, he don't need no passport amidst these countries because he could travel thanks to the wealth of his family. His mother squandered that wealth. That's why you don't know where I come from. I want to Moshe a dynasty lana, and they're trying to finish off into I'm recovering that, which frankly is the birthright of my dad because he squandered it, and the birthright of my mom. My mom was the one bride in a family of kids coming from a simple home where my grandfather on my mom's side was a construction worker building. My grandfather was a construction worker and because of his industriousness, he saw it fit to grab his skills as a construction worker to akha his own house and to basically grab all the skills he gained from Kwako di Topo and bring it lana, and that's why, and also build homes Soweto to bring bread ejecting. So he was a skilled blue-collar laborer that nonetheless created a very comfortable lifestyle for my grandmother. That was my grandfather. And so the children in that household were ones who started out in a small house that was being built around them. Infrastructure, electricity. I remember a time when we were rolling around these streets, stove. And then one day we got electricity, and then there was electric stove, the whole electrical infrastructure. Electrical infrastructure, because as the years progressed, we took all these things from his construction work. So my dad was just a very hardworking construction worker that ultimately made a middle-class life for my grandmother. Therefore, they came from humble beginnings, whereas my dad's dad was already influential, right, as a businessman who was with great wealth, enough for Banabahaya from the get-go coming up to have much. So therefore, when my dad ultimately went into these Josie streets and met the yellow bone that was my mom and found her pretty, omo file lifestyle, omo upgraded, onkile ngwana wako kasini is simple, kontlung jefela is simple, esenang kerele motlakasi because proper motlakasi o kentswe ko jarateng kontlung ya ko tladi ke phela already. So my dad frankly took my mom out from humble life, a very humble life. But my mom was fly as heck. She was gorgeous, do you understand? So it doesn't matter. And back in the day, men, nebasna this thing that you got, this disease coursing through the veins of men today where you're marrying for clout, where you're marrying because somebody's family be looking some kind of way. No, that was before those days where men were so namby-pamby that they couldn't shella abafazi and just fell off the bat just because they did not holla at ladies because they just were so fly, and that's all they ran with. They were the ones that upgraded women. So even if you came from humble beginnings, a dude be out, you're putting you in an aeroplane for the first time. That's how men used to be back in the day. And my dad was exactly that thing to my mom. Utate an uneducated lady onasebetsa with matric fella go okay. My mom used to listen, you're trying to take me to the poverty. You are literally trying to take me to the poverty of my mom, the simplicity of my mom, the blue collar life of my mom before my dad came on board. You're trying to do that to me, but I was the kid, and so therefore I inherited an upper middle class lifestyle. That's what I inherited, and people are trying to take me to the days of doo doo doo. My mother was that girl. Bonke doo doo. Never said okay. After matric, okay. Doo scanning groceries. So these chicks that you underestimate in these streets, bascanan di koza kodi garaging that work at the quick shop, SSO garage. Bahle yo mara doo because of the fact that we are doo palomuntu and agasebenzi at corporate South Africa. Nyamnyaza. But just like what I said in my other video, my dad took doo. Wamchata wamienza. Yo, wapere seta sako sokrati ini. Yo, wapere minkutu. Ya Burberry ki yo, wapere, what is that king of the Moschino? Yo, wapere Gucci king. That's what my dad did with my mom. Umtate turup. Amisa skolweni, wankutla. Amisa skolo. Amupatala di school fees. I pull out these strings, see, because he was already an estimate. My mom only studied since they're early older. That's why some of her friends are a good 10 years younger than her. Mami says, he took my mom to school and he took my mom out of turup. Wambega in corporate South Africa where you're working with computers. Wambega in corporate South Africa where you're working with paper, where you are wearing ikwai and not just some loafers. Uplomile on some plastic. But instead of plasticky, back then, everybody in plastic was free, like, but like proper. You could just grab it, 10 bengazo. Yeah, so it was before the days of plastic. Mara still, my mom was that chick out there asking people, Ufuna, e plastic. She was. And people want me to endure the generational curse, frankly, of just that level of simplicity when sekukichilwe manje out of just rudimentary income levels. And there's runaway in 2025 where everybody is, like I said, you're glitching AI robots, aren't you guys, hey? Your software is glitching and so too is your hardware broken. Yeah, the moment you hear nostalgic music, you be out here, how the we get saying because you remember people, but you're so desperately trying to reduce people to nothing but grocery scanners at the Sasol garage that you can't even wake up to smell the coffee to realize what you have lost as people, millennials. Lo, now that are the turn of the generation of my parents. Sometimes you can find a chick out here turup, scanning groceries at OK Bazaar. Scanning the groza ko OK Bazaar. OC. Bese uyo chatting daughter that's gonna put Gucci on your buttock. Like I'm not listen, they've lost the plot. Mara, you see, plot leyo. It's exactly what made my father self-medicate ngotshwala. It's what made him self-medicate ka alcohol. Obo noro usenze. Mara, I guess that's the thing. How long okay bazaar and then run her through school? You're not gonna find it necessary in right? My dad used to cheat so badly on my mom that not cheat on my mom. Go campusing with my editorial on my mom. She was so shocked when she got married. When I cheated on her on campus, where my mom used to study, where my dad was a lecturer. My father was so educated and so academic. About 8 to 10 years, and being I believe like a student lecturer at the university that my mom used to study, Unibo. Ultimately he went and became a law lecturer at Wits. Mega shalama students at yo dog ish. Yeah, this guy. My mom was given a student what do they call this thing? Like a reduction in paying school fees precisely because her husband was one of the student lecturers. So her fees were half paid for. Type setup thing. But my dad is the one that counseled my mom, get your degree, because my dad was already an academic in and of himself. He was like, get your degree. So my mom went and studied law, and she studied full-time. School fees full-time. My dad. You see, a person unama virtues, kodwa unama vices. Uthatha umfazi wathi uskawara tudu school fees sa degree. Haidlopatala that ne. Mara, I'll pay for it. So my mother was taken to school by my dad. Nadula on campus. That's how much everything was catered to. My grandmother didn't have money to pay for my mom to go to school. My aunt Naye, the husband. That's the family that I come from. And I guess it makes sense as to why my uncle, still to this day, out of my mom, the children born in that marriage, out of my mom and my aunt and my uncle is the only one that doesn't have a degree because my uncle was the man. And ain't nobody out here gonna be paying fees for a man. My uncle was the one that had to grind, that had to hustle. He started a salon at some point, worked for Liberty Life, etc. I get a degree. God, but I was his degree. My mom's sister is a teacher while my mother did HR. Listen, there's a history to our men. They were better than that. Mara also nebata way ili rubbish. My aunt's husband, he dropped the ball. Baba bouncing the flames babana. Bonta me ferry fela mi duba fela mperekane fena tlakan suka yama jumpa. And so my uncle is the only one that missed that sibling pair or that sibling trio that is without a degree because in daughter he had to grind. And like I said, nobody ought to be paying no man's fees, right? Cherry back. Well, that was then. Women these days, roles have been reversed. My uncle made it work. He was maintained in corporate South Africa. That was because you don't have a degree, you're not going to get very far. One of those guys that are older in the business, but he's not as far as like up and coming young professionals that come from universities that are just skyrocketing past him. My uncle was that guy that grew very slowly in corporate South Africa because he didn't have a degree. Whereas my mom today's an executive because she has a degree. That's the thing. Do you understand? My mother's prosperity out of all of her siblings is the loftiest. Kotwa, she is the one that has the least to show for it. Because remember that sack that's been sliced? That's got grain falling out of it? Yeah. Because Unalungwana, that's Jabez, and Wanona is being gazed upon very carefully by the God of the universe. And seeing as my daughter, Jabez, the female version, even though you are the only one that is an executive out of all of your siblings because you married a dude that took you to university and you had a track in corporate South Africa that put you in basically the elite among South African business people. Right next to all the other executives. Where it is that you're working at the company, you're going to be the only one who belongs to fill in a meager little townhouse complex in a neighborhood. You're going to buy beautiful properties. We've stayed in homes before that this place it does not compare to some of the places that we stayed before. My mom was just nomadic, open up, but she had given birth to a child of promise and she did not steward her. And so the Lord wavuzisa ipapsa yakhe ukuthi iwine yakhona iflow out because because the Lord, my mom, is, what do you call this thing, superstitious. The reason why izinto zakhe zingahambi kahle was because she was not right towards her daughter. And she was able to put 2 and 2 together, and still to this day she's putting 2 and 2 together. Learning lesson. And so therefore Noma anemali eningi ukundlula ama-siblings wakhe wonke. She's always giving them elaborate pieces of furniture ezidurayo kabuhlungabi, hand me down, even though in comparison to all of her family members akubonakali ukuthi she's the wealthiest one. Listen, no executive should be living in this kind of meager housing. We're supposed to be living Koboma Sunning Hill morning, not we, she with her husband. I'm supposed to have my own establishment. Family is the academic one. Ekaya. Mr. Tina Sonke. I told you my sister Obadileko Harvard. Ninjelile. That's what it is that I come from. So this dude that passed me up, like nonsense, the story of which I'm going to ultimately revert to. It appears I'm not going to be able to sing it because I can't keep busy kaditori monana. Hulukile. Tikuranta yaka ena. Maybe kitlo bina anyway, mara. Let's nonsense. So you don't even deserve the bina zaka. Anyway, mara di bina because it's about me feeling better right now. Not so much about Lona. Anyway. My father took my mom to school, right? My grandmother was not poor. My grandfather was a blue-collar laborer that, however, made ends meet successfully enough he built enough homes in the Kasi where we stayed with the same CI, like basically same corporate identity, the same housing structure as many houses. Like if you were to go to Gladi Soweto and compare the house my grandfather built versus many of the other houses in the same neighborhood. Because they're actually looking at them. So essentially he was low-key, as much as you can do in the days of apartheid. He's somewhat of a construction boss. He was a construction boss. He could have been, if at all, socioeconomically it was allowable for a black man to be that thing. He could have been a construction tycoon. Because where it is that we stay. And so that's what gave us a middle income lifestyle and why we were among the first families to actually light up with electricity. And then we had what would be called a big house, SOH, while everybody else was just struggling to make ends meet, pushing, Nyana 102. We were the one family. We were the one family that did really well. Type establishment thing. Yeah, Mara, if you look at the trade of my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother was a seamstress. Unaya go downtown Joburg, alo rekisa dikatiba tsa gagwe. Go downtown Joburg. That was her 2 cents worth of making money. Unaya tsa chelete nkgonwaka. On the side, like basically, you know, the Bible says she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at days to come. She considers a field and buys it. She sees that it is profitable. And so it's basically a merchandiser. Even though her man is the sole provider, nonetheless, she still makes her own living because something is very, very industrious. And from scratch. My grandmother was witchcraft, idolatry. My grandmother was extremely industrious. You know, canned peaches. She was so industrious. Canned peaches. My grandmother was like, "Kitlo di rega go to the supermarket for what? Kitlo di etsa. Una di etsa from scratch. With una di etsa from scratch with the syrup and everything. You know how canned peaches are in syrup? She would grab di perekisi from difate, as in marketing. She would pick the perekisi from difate, chop them up, and then make the syrup. Just chilling outside, baking in the sun over a couple of days, and then made kind of softish. And next thing we've got canned peaches in the jarata. When I get the biscuits, because why not want to get like a coupe, the Mari biscuits for any when I can make them. When I bake, when I get that, like, that's why I get those that from scratch. It's inherited. So essentially, my grandmother could have run anything, a confectionery. She could have run a little store, a supermarket. She could have made baked treats. She could have. Mara azang bahona. Because generational curse because of ancestral worship. Because of idolatry, God will cause you a little sack full of wheat. Cut in the center. A man in the family that could have been a construction boss as time progressed just didn't become that thing because he was a heinous sinner and an idolater. A woman and an idolater. A woman that can make things from scratch could have been the next biscuit brand in the market. Could have been a bakery. Could have been a. My grandmother was so industrious that I can really seamstress. Not acha. That's what my grandfather did. Acharang is building. Unaroka di gatiba and then rekisa go Marlboro go Santon and then happily go downtown Johannesburg, and that's how she made money. And then when we went to school, primary school, because make durangi shomanga izingeni kitloreka di cool beans for anyone, I can make them myself after picking them from a tree. I can pick lentils and make my own can of cool beans. My grandmother was like that, very industrious, very I got this myself. When we started going to school was like school uniform the school uniform tsetsa lona ko economic outfitters na ke tseba go roka mos nkgonwa ka go roketse di panty o roketse di tunic tsa mo botsang my cousins sonke mesi tsoka ama school uniforms that my grandmother rokad when we were at Mayfair Convent, because that's when she was with strength and vigor and still alive. She passed away when we were 16, and towards the end of her life, only wiki so nasa khone anymore like that. Only wiki and so nasa khone like that. But understand, those were the days before insurance policies, right? My grandfather passed away while my grandmother was still entirely wholeheartedly reliant on him. However, my grandfather passed away when I was already alive, so she was also enabled along by her kids. But remember, her kids, I remember when my mom was studying, so she was not altogether that moneyed. Also, my uncle at the back of my grandmother's house, so there was no such thing as my children are gonna support me to keep this household running. It was everybody had to contribute something. So because my grandmother was industrious type establishment thing, after my grandfather passed away and now that source of income dried up, plus my grandfather died from gastric cancer, so therefore he was sick for a very long amount of time, and there was necessity therefore to self-provide. My grandmother then said, okay, so I get it. It was not a mortgage. My grandfather built it. We take it on how home loan anywhere type establishment thing. So it was fully paid into the electrical infrastructure. Yeah, so there was no abscess coming for you type setup thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Therefore, my grandmother was said just in terms of bond. or tantamount. There was never any bond over there, right? Mara, all that she needed to take care of was basically the electricity bill to run things as basic ejardini that needed money. I know Ukokwam just got straight to work. She was like, I can. There was a time when she would get on a taxi, alo di rekisa, adikenza mo plastiking, and then she would get money for the katiba tsena di roka. La nkutwa. And then ona roka hapele her sister. My great aunt, right? The sister wa khathala kala wa pume jarateng ya my grandmother. She used to come every single day. Atoroka ko jarateng ya khonwaka. Ba lo rekisa dikatiba. But then the sister nona le michini e 2 ya khoroka. The sister got tired first, and she indeed passed away first, right? But then my grandmother carried on anzaroka wa khathala naye, stopped being able to to downtown, even though there was a time when my cousin now was the one it just got to a point where it was just exhausting. It was just rote mundane work where nakata patini and she was doing it for very many years because she got tired somewhere along the way, and the sole breadwinner was now late. My grandfather ultimately passed away. She needed more money, so what did she do? Over the years, it became the ice, the mayo, the ice cream. She just added on to that. But initially there was like a booming business Aja doing its thriving rounds in the Gussie of Mazimba. And then Khunwaka was, Mazimba. And then wrap up the plastikita thing. That was my nkhono. Okay? Because she was trying to make profits, bumper profits. And it worked. It paid for everything. Mazimba le makipikipi. Keep ndlu ya mkhonwaka in a bunch. Rekile maroto le dipapa. Rekile makipikipi ale a thusitse la nkutwa le mazimba. And then my grandmother was like, hey, ke a bona mona na hore makipikipi a thusa le mazimba. And then she started selling the beer le di cold drink. The day I remember when they started selling the cold drink ko jarateng, ke ha ho kenya di cold drink tse ngata tse di kana mo hara fridge e regular ko kitchen. Ha go sana space jwanong for cabbage re tlwetsa nka di cold drink tse mo hara fridge. And then my grandmother bought, because of the profits that she was making from ho rekisa di cold drink, first re di store di cold drink tsena mo hara fridge ya go kitchening. Then she was able to purchase industrial fridges like that, and there was one in the dining room and then another such refrigerator ko kamoreng yang khonwaka. And then because she sold the beer, the cold drink, and we would then we then grab remove change, remove Hansa, remove Fanta, remove Sprite. We became a little spazza in the Gussie. And then my grandmother sold the mayo after that. Watengisa ice cream, scooping it hanyane fela. And we couldn't just be out and nibbling at that ice cream. Every so often we'd go to her and be like, Mama kupa ma keep. Mama kupa ma zemba. Mama kupa mayo. And she'd be like, But once a week we got mayo. Anyway, whatever. So that was what under heaven was going on over there, and Business Anna actually kept that place together with sticky tape. You have no idea when you're a child making an observation of these things, how well these things out here be working out. So my grandmother became that industrious. She stopped sewing because anymore. Now, Mara, she could indeed make you ipunga right here in these streets proper. You walking around floating in a swimming pool. How jampaka fahari wa pere bunga wankutwa looking like a baby diaper or whatever. Or the roketse di bunga. And then goes kolong sa rona di bunga tsa rona, they had to be school CI, like white or blue. Ko Mayfair. So una reka material in the fella that she would match up against the ones that we bought at Economic Outfitters or Woolworths or go Edgar's, and then be like, I got this. So that whole bunga thing, that whole business mind and industriousness of my grandmother then translated over to her child, of course, my uncle, who started a salon because maungena degree la emkatwen la rinyatsa la nkutla ha o sena degree ba sa go hiri go corporate South Africa. Mara, I mean, you gotta see what you gotta do like kasini. My uncle and Impinjake, my cousin, who was much older, so age my uncle, were like, let's start a hair salon. And listen, these things thrived. Mara, when you are full of idolatry, when you are full of idolatry, when you're full of idol worship, when you are full of ancestral worship, when you are full of evil, salunya we bulang, that is going to be packed at the brim every single day of the week. And then kadi Saturday Yes, like it ana motho tsebang go etsalang mona. O ka khona o aga ntlo kaofela ka di revenues tsa salon ya hao abuti. O lo rekisa ditulo ko saloneng hore di ladies ba ropotsang ba tlo khona le go patala rent to use your salon. Yeah, mara you will end up working a 9-to-5 in corporate South Africa because business is dwindling. Because you see, business dwindles when you sin. Business dries up when you are dishonoring to God, when you are not enabling the cause of his disciples, or when you are thwarting it. So my uncle, who was my uncle was because there was not enough money to take him to university. He was a chemistry student. Why quit all that stuff? Because he couldn't carry on in school, because he was a man and a man had to do what a man had to do. So he got into hair. Why in Zinwe? I'm a business boomer. And they moved to downtown Joburg, kind city king. You know, small street. There was a salon that was 2 stories high. Koteng in the 90s, if at all you might remember. Salunia 2 stories. That was my uncle and my cousin's joint. It was a very elaborate, the most biggest and baddest hair salon in all of downtown Joburg. It was my family salon. Because of the Bitzabon, my uncle broke away from my cousin, was stop or sebenza e corporate South Africa, but then my cousin carried on Kasaluni Engwe different, another part of Joburg. I wore the baddest weave in the game. Trick dance engwe ekotsi ele khadima enkhositseng gore di prefect tsa go sekolong tse jealous tsa banyana to say to me, nobody's supposed to wear bonding, Mose John. After matric dance you were supposed to take it down. After passing me shade, and I was like, listen, teachers don't got any beef with me keeping my bonding until it has expired on my head. We were not allowed to wear the weave, the braiding, the anything. Mara, if at all we had matric dance, we could for the one event. Matric dance, they wanted me to weave just a week after matric dance, cause listen, matric dance is over. Bring down your weave. I was like, I'll bring it down when my teacher says I must bring it down. I'll be bringing it down at my opportune moment. Go and tell the principal, listen, I dare you. Why? Because mina angizo susa 100% human hair after just 1 week of having it. Walking around bonding that is down to my torso. Cousin. Human hair 100% me o maizali so as a present for matric dance. Oh yeah, matric dancing nana. Okay, fine. Dula mo fats. Bangruka so put in a sew in. Enye yom staba. Hectic, hard, not intense. And I'll just be swaying left and right. Ka weave. Libedi di prefect is jealous za banyana ba batho bantu ba batla ho ntwetsa gore nna ke ntshe bonding ya ka ka re ba itsekeng. If at all I had spent my own money on bonding ena, it would have cost me a cool 2,000 rands. Mara ene le mahala cause it's wako heso. So ko banje fela o tse monna le bonding ya ka. They left me to keep that bonding until I took it out. Baga. Gabega inta. Ene so wile engekazi. Unalenzwembu like that. So in 2025, where everybody be out experimenting, got the lace front wig. Labo ticket, like the industry of hair has just ever since then boomed. I could only imagine or cousin yaga le my uncle. Unkebeba guy. Hair industry. They'd be tycoons, moguls. Today, they would have sourced stuff out internationally. They would have gone to India. They would have and so, listen, every one of these businesses fell apart. But what I'm trying to explain is that my family and my grandmother was hustlers, not academics. They were hustlers, not academics. But my mom was both a hustler and an academic, a combination. My dad, however, was an academic. So, lo na baba dileng ba feditse di degrees a una ko ma vets. I got my degree, but I come from a family of people out making their own canned peaches, of salons out raising up from the ground, being the biggest and better salon in downtown Joburg. Go Small Street, you will remember, in the 90s, no hectic, intense, go small city, go small street. It was my family's. Go family where it is that grandfather Yaga was essentially a civil engineering tycoon. To a point where today you can go to Soweto, see my grandfather's house, my grandmother's house, including my uncle, and notice that there's so many other houses in that same kasi that look exactly like that house. The looking construction tycoon. Lankome. Azang ba mara to get anywhere kind of far because I'm sure by tagata. Na baloyana. Abana loyalty within themselves. They can't create dynasties. They could not create empires. They could not become mammoth. My mom, Lena ho etsa miriri. I get it very DIY. We understand relax. It was just a travesty. Somewhere along the way in my journey as a kid, I had to go to saloon in because frankly, I did not know what it was like to pay for your relaxer or your crane or your robota or your conro or anything. We're looking at the kels, the thing, the kels because of holding spray. Mara, you that cute chick for the week, koskolong. Yeah, the fact that somewhere else mina ngatongwa other than by my uncle or my cousin. The fact that mina anywhere else ngaqhinwa by anyone other than my mom. My mother wait again una re loga merero akero abutwa gage una khona relax. Still to this my mom ha saluning. My mom una le relax he. Ha sa ya saluning because wa tseba go khona go relaxa. Ona relaxa meriri ya rona. And then abari loga after that. So in the beginning stages when she was still a responsible mother before my dad went to Arai, she used to DIY DIY dog. So we would go to school with these hairstyles that look like we come from salons. Ona rata, you know, nan lete ena ya roga so in. Ona rata ho loga merero na jwalo ka there's so in one line or say two, and then kopile I see a leave out, and then I write tonga. So nerea skolong ka meriri o tongilweng mo pele mo. And then komorago gona le one row by sewing down. It was cute. So koskolong we were always regarded as bana ba le ba bantle ba dulang ba tongile meriri ba dulang ba le cute. Listen, you don't know where I come from, Maradibe. Caused my mother to even lose her skill. Go high school, neke dula ke ya ke di saloon nyana tse snacks because my cousin and my uncle never on and off ka di saloon tsa bona until my uncle finally ended up in boring corporate South Africa. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It was just a travesty for me to go nyenzi no less I'm anywhere else other than Giti. Ukubhadala mina for relax. Yo kanjani abantu bakithi bayazutonga bayazugunda bayazuqhina we or bayazufaka enye bonding that looks like I'm like a gorgeous lady from India, to a point where matriculants prefects baba to abantu ko matric ought to be passing me shade for having bonding yana engwe amohlaba ke loko matric proper. It was a travesty that in certain parts of my high school and even after high school hore ne ke ya salooning anywhere nje fela lo etsa meriri because the business tsa go gae di wele. So people that now today are supposed to be millionaires and billionaires, people that were supposed to be so wealthy that bana ba teng were never supposed to struggle for want. Bana ba teng they were never supposed to struggle for education. If they wanted to study, they could study. If they wanted to proliferate and continue the family business, they would proliferate the family business. The fact that kwamele kugerezwe kabuhlungu kanje na ekhaya to a point of so much sabotage amidst cousins just to get careers. When our parents started already dynasties, they already, never mind dynasties, but our parents already started empires. That we were supposed to just take the baton from there and go forward. Mara azangu abangithi na a single millionaire. Ekhaya, still to this day. Kunama skills amanye ahekti kodwa akukabi namuntu that has broken into ubumillionaire. My sister was close. Mara wafola apart because of alcohol. Kune curse coursing through the veins. And umuntu that now wants to break past these curses. Ningduti mosifubeng lanyaza libatla mfatu bob. You wanna take me back to turup. Okay. Akere nkhono kana rekisa dikati. Mewaka in the beginning le auntie. Because there was not enough money ekhaya. Ukuyisa abantu esikolweni basebenze okay. Baqala peace job bathola ama peace job bayosebenza okay, and then ubaba wahlangana nelikhadima elenye elentswembu le yellow bone in these gassy streets atwa go Helbron. Atwa di blessings engang be Sasolburg. Y'all know like Sasolburg actually stinking because of like all that petrol. I don't know if that's still a thing. Wafika Joburg wabona very beautiful girls. I missed them, of which was my mom. What you mina ngamfuna futhi ngizomchata. And after marrying my mom, seeing as my dad was an academic, my dad was wealthy, my dad onali koloyi, my dad onali famous, ali popular, I drive all over these streets. So therefore, when a simple girl was okay from a family that's very industrious, uprada wenza inwele ekasi isalon yabo ayika movie before there was a salon kotladi and then it moved to downtown Joburg because they were expanding. I get it. Abutwa gage wetsa miriri oswa gage lena turup ko okay. My aunt married first. My aunt was the first one to be taken to school by her husband, right? Oswa tengo ubala teaching degree. Ona sisters busy turup ko okay, turup ko okay. My uncle's wife, still to this day, I believe she is now retired, however, okay. That is my family. Abafaz bakhona lowly. Mara, they married men that made out of them really honest women. They made them women that frankly could now flex. Flex, dog. Flex. Makata flex manje bese uzodelela etleke ha mudima ka gotsela go kerele nip like some nail clippers. I flex yakho. Mudima aka gonkela go tsipele flex ya teng cause wa swaba akere abut. O tletse ka o tella mona mo strateng. Rona ha re di kene taba tsa wena nzo flexa mudima o feeling yona so go gotsela flex. Yeah, my family can now today only flex on my career, the Christian Louboutin, the Gucci coats, only because go grinded from the ground up. And there was a time when men were willing to marry about tudup as a Pick and Pay. And my dad married a tudup on Pick and Pay, go Pick and Pay. One mega a Burberry coat. amo apesa fascinator hat ya go Durban July. Amo khurumedza nje fela ka di jazz. It's a very expensive. Amo bontsha Moschino. Amo bontsha United Colors of Benetton. And after abonisu mawam United Colors of Benetton, namakwai adurayo. What was that clothing, that shoe brand from back in the day? Ele ya hudura. It had like an emblem so my mom they're only ugly as I think about them, because they were back in the day type ugly shoes. Maranele high-end fashion of the time. It was the Christian Louboutin of the time. Like back in the day where women are to be rocking these stockings. Yeah, I don't know why y'all ain't wearing rocking stockings anymore, because the jiggly thigh salon boys is what I'm getting at. You don't have that thing that olden day women used to have. Their legs are to be looking all tan, even though they black girls. These stockings, kimagusha. These sheer stockings. Marasa diapara now today, cause wonka bafazi today. Abasa koga stockings. I don't know what it is that was with the insistence upon stockings back in the day, but not frankly, like listen, come summer or winter, moga napara these stockings till it's a sheer. Na diapara, langkut. Hormantoka looking at ashina. Every day to go to work, winter or summer, make a my stockings. Frankly, if I could bring those stockings back, I would wear them because they were classy. They were really classy. Now the thunder thighs tabasadi all over these streets. Listen, I don't know what's going on. Halisa keep everything in a bunch anymore. Now uapara like a bit of a corset thing just to keep the upper body part tucked in a neat little bunch, but no more is she out rocking ama stockings. And just to basically not only contour her legs, give them better shape, but also eradicate like blotches and patches and cellulite and whatnot. That's what that was for. But modern day women, you are so immodest. You're so immodest that ansas buys gelem sama stockings. I wonder if it's still an industry that's booming. I bet ama stockings nepela agogwa la opaque ngama school students. Every other type of stocking alsana dabalona. Every other type of stocking alsana dabalona. I remember Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. One of the scenes was of her putting stockings up her leg, because proper stockings were like part and parcel of a woman's attire back in the day. Come summer or come winter. Now you be out here getting blown by the wind with a short skirt, and everybody sees the jiggling cellulites just exposed because our stocking. I would probably bring back stockings if I could. I would totally bring them back, but I would make them so fashionable. I think I would make them myself. I would like dye them and like color them different colors so they would look really cute. Yeah, anyway, whatever. So that they could basically just kind of mix with my fashion sense. I would make them multicolored, like polka dots and stuff, underneath like a pure white dress, but still rock stockings, because they basically exacerbate, essentially make it worse. Modesty. They enable modesty in the worst way. Not today, like I said, naked ladies and everybody be seeing your visible panty line. Akusena class. Anyway, whatever. Just so do what you want to do and do away with stockings if you wanna. I don't care, but I'm still filling them. Yeah, my mother was trained lifestyle Julia Roberts go Pretty Woman, but without being a prostitute. She was taken on shopping sprees. Elaborate. Hey batung, when I listen to business where my mother is chilling next to my dad. Go a courtroom, outside of a courtroom, my dad lawyer. And my mother is rocking some fur. Listen, I am not even lying. She is rocking some like fur hat. Like, it looks like a Busby. I don't know if you've done drummies before. You know these Busby hats that ought to be looking like the hats that soldiers in like the United Kingdom be rocking outside of the King's Palace or whatever, the Queen's Palace. She was rocking like a Busby hat, but like it was brown and kind of shortish. Shorter than a Busby, and it was so classy, and it had like a brooch over there, and she was rocking a sash, if you will, that was also made of something furry, and then like a green dress underneath, standing next to my dad. And Gamatasa Busby, I think it was like a tuft of afro hair. And I remember just thinking, listen, there was so much glory and so much class in back in the day. Mara, there was also so much sin. Because listen, it has contributed to whatever's going on today in 2025. It has absolutely contributed to whatever is happening in these 2025 streets. That is trying to bring back the glory of family and of dynasties and the thickness and the girth of men and what men are supposed to do. Listen, you don't insist that a woman rock up already wearing a Busby hat. You put a Busby hat on her head and stop thinking about dumb things like marriage and community of property, 50-50, prenuptial agreement. What is wrong with you? You are men. You are men. That's why Kisinatabaka all these randos. My uncle went and grabbed umfazi wakhe that had no matric. Oh, I go okay. Then I tudup and then my uncle connected his wife with that tudup okay job because my mom worked. Le also a thing. Go okay. And so she was like, please connect my wife with a job. Hana matric. My mom was like, but because she didn't need matric. That's why my aunt never ever left that particular job. It's because she never ever went for her matric. As I went to matric akona. To fit a matric. Mara, you see, if you don't love iskolo as a woman, it should not make you poor for life. Because men are supposed to be men. Like my uncle was a man to umfaz like tudup, scanning groceries until she retired. For pocket change if that. It was there just to buy her the dog sweet little mayo. That was my aunt. Mara, for big things like indlu ephelele, for big things like imoto, batong, my aunt still can't drive today. She's like a typical old school wife belonging to an old school husband that however never laid a hand on her. So I guess she could say that I feel really blessed for tabayao my husband azang wang klapa neither divorce me, because if at all my uncle were to ever divorce my aunt, she'd be on a limb. No matric and can't even drive. She would be reduced to a widow chilling at her father's house and hope to basically be fed by generous sponsors and generous donors in the community. But she was kept in comfort all of her life and never divorced and connected with some kind of a job that makes any kind of sense. By my uncle, okay, and that same aunt, if at all my uncle had decided to divorce her and do whatever it is that men sometimes do, my aunt would have then on that day determined, that's what started feminism. It's what I'm getting at. My aunt would have then been like, yo, I can't take care of my children and my ex-husband is in Yongo. And so she would have only lightning strikes and the thunderbolts. Finished matric, and then after finishing matric, try to get a better job in Corpus Africa now that she has matric, and then taking herself to a higher learning institution. She would have essentially made herself with the strength of men so that she could take care of herself and her children. My aunt would have been driven to finish school if my uncle had not maintained himself as that which men are supposed to be. Listen, provide and don't insist on a woman having clout. If she doesn't have it, you give it to her. You give it to her. But what maintained my uncle in that willingness to go and provide for my aunt like that, it was Tabao Relena. He came from a lowly position. You see, humbler men on earth, my uncle's not humble. He is not, he get nonsense today. Mara, lowly in comparison to the siblings that high. What I'm saying by humbler, I'm meaning by means. Humbler men, and by humbler, I mean men with less means, tend to be more willing to date lowly women and work that much harder to maintain, like, middle class to lower middle class lifestyles. I just have a house, and I'm content. And I'm at 2 bedrooms. Or I'm at 3 bedrooms. And I need to make sure that I keep on working to take care of umfazwa. Men are far better husbands to wives. That even though basabeza as security guards, that even though basabeza as shelf packers at Builder's Warehouse, macro, even though they work at Leroy Merlin out here, putting tiles in the back of cars of customers, when you go home to where they stay, and when they're still in their 20s after getting married, maybe ki room even at the back of their parents' house, mara, as they get older, 30, 40, they will never ever own a mansion, just like my uncle never ever owned a mansion. They will never ever have a big car, a BMW. They will never ever have basically, not clout, but the word that I'm looking for is the pump to be able to boast. They will never ever be braggadocious about what they own. Mara, Montratenge will have. Sing as what rumin. That's why my uncle started the man antiam. Sing as what rumin, ne? But could look rumin. Korumu. Kokasi at the back of their parents' house. From Rumiatengi, they then moved to downtown Johannesburg. My uncle always lived in some of the most shoddy places. Everywhere he went, my aunt. And he would save money all throughout the year, and at the end of the year, we used to covet my cousins, even though they were the poorest ones among us. Because never go to Cape Town and let the aeroplane. Where they used to stay, the flat is go downtown Joburg, where Kichimama Pale, never blada. And then my uncle moved to Naturina. And we are from scratch. And in the beginning, no fence around the house. It was just Andrew in the center. An island, and then just enough bathroom and 3 bedrooms. Mara, like what tapete, as in the very basic shell of Indlu. Mawi akuna tiles, pants, just the cement that basically is on top of your foundation. That was the floor. That was the floor. The window, you could still see let's opa around it. Let's because he got the cheapest of construction workers, and so far as iwindu ivalwa and ivulwa, I'm good. The garden hanging on walls that indeed were painted. It was just low quality paint, and the kitchen had no cupboards, no built-in cupboards. The one cupboard, the one sink, that's where they would put bread, the bread bin. That's where they would stack the coup beans. And then just in terms of the cupboard, they were not built in. Like I said, it was one that was carried portable, that they took from where they used to stay good flatting. So like this that you brought in, they're portable. That's where they would then store like the iwi sa di maize meal including my cousin's house, my uncle's house, your dog. It was so dark in the house because the floor was gray because it was cement, and the walls were, yes, painted what color they wanted, mara it was substandard paint. And then there was nothing to decorate. The jardini were lackluster. The house was scantily furnished, and that was like a maintained status quo in Naturina, all the way until my grandmother died. For years it stayed like that, and for years it had no fence, it had no gate. Listen, when I was made to stay at Naturina during this season, only then was my uncle building a fence around that house. It was just a yawning, open, gaping house. It didn't have a brick wall, but it had, a fence that like wire. You just had to trust ukuthi akuzogqeyezwa lana. Akuzoba umuntu ozofuna ukungena lana because clearly le ndlu lena ayibonakali anyway, so utlo uzwa ngamo. Tapate hamba akunanes lana. And indeed there was barely any casualties, but incidents, but they became incidents when the woman that was now gentrified by a man that married her, my mom, moved in there. My grandmother passed away, and then the house went, old school way of doing life. My uncle was not the firstborn, but he was a boy. Interstate succession. My uncle was not the firstborn. If anything, he was the lastborn. He was a baby. Mara, you know how back in the day women used to fall pregnant every year? My aunt, my mom, and my uncle, literally, there's three of them, and they're 3 years. They are each 1 year older than each other. So my grandmother was just pregnant 1 year after the other, and brought forth these children. So there's not much of an age gap. Over there, however, my uncle was the lastborn. All up in that girl. And so being the lastborn in this society that has no regard for men and their patriarchal duty and headship over a situation, this society that we live in would have been like, hey, and I'm the oldest sister. My aunt would have been like, I'm the oldest sister, this is my house. And they would have fought and made like little animals scratching at each other when my grandmother died. But instead, it was just tacitly understood that my uncle, when my grandmother died, nobody gave him grief. He already had his own house at Naturina. Out. So my uncle today has 2 properties that he owns. He didn't sell. So basically over time, like I said, poor guys that don't have much, they're the ones that stay with their wives, and over the years, if these women are content, tiles, built-in cupboards, even though you have to put newspaper over a window instead of the jardin because you have not yet drilled in the railings. Whatever. And over the years, tiles. Over the years, built-in cupboards. Over the years, and so you will find construction work. You know how you find homes like those, where there's like heaps of sand that has been there for like 5 months, but halfway, and a little fails because you can only build so much wall with whatever it is that you're grinding. By the time kids walk on it was like 3/4 done. It wasn't finished, and there was still sand, soil heaped to try and finish something else by faith. And my uncle had built the room and extended the house. And again, built pavement. He created some place where it is that it was easier to walk, and then he then erected a fence strata washing. When we stayed there, no strata washing. Listen, I don't even know how we dried laundry. Maybe there was one washing he added that basically, right? But when my mom moved in, because my mom lifestyle in that she walked into this dark house, and I also walked into this dark house. Initially I didn't want to move there, and that's the townhouse where it was all glorious and bright with many built-in cupboards. My mom and made a deal, a contract with my uncle that you must pay me back this much money every single month. Let's agree. How if I'm gonna move into it, because it was their agreement. He was like, I'm gonna move out of this house and go to Tladi because mama died. But you please come and live where I stay. And then my mother was like, very well, I don't mind. Mara, I'm gonna basically, because my mom was doing well now, she was like, I'm then going to Kenya, the kitchen cupboards, kitlo Thailand, kitlo penta mabota, kitlo Kenya, the curtain railings. I'm just gonna make your house all bouse. And then my ex-boyfriend, I met him through my cousin, and he had seen my cousin's house go natch when my cousin was still staying there. We then moved in, and I remember when he came go here, so again, this guy onang pasile up from back in the day, all with whom I was eating the falafel, go outside his car. If he had seen this, he would have realized it's a jackpot. I live with a chick that is an upgrade. Like, she upgrades everything. Like, Papa, her mother is an upgrader, so I'm gonna be upgraded as a man. If at all this dude had seen in Piloyam beyond just recognizing that Nike is a call center, he wouldn't have passed me up. Anyway, whatever, my boyfriend rocks up after my mom refurbishes it. Type establishment thing, and he was like, yo, this house is like another house. It's a new house. It's like proper. Yar. He could not stop going into every room in that house that he could go into because he had been there before. I go check it on my cousin and been in the kitchen and been in whatever, chilled in the lounge. And then he came and visited me when I was his girlfriend, right? And he was like, I get it, my cousin used to date his boy, so they'd been go habo. When he came, he was like, yar, that was my mom. Upgrading. Mara, she came from a history where it is that she had the level of loneliness that my uncle had. Do you understand? She came from that history. But then a man showed her things, introduced her to a new life. Enemali, ebonagalang, enang di taile, enang di elaborate finishings, enang le Gucci all over your body, out your dripping, enang di jewelry zedi kana, enang di stockings. Enangle. Oh, this is my mom etiquette. Like, he basically taught my mom how to be the wife of a man of means. Mara, he didn't also have the character with it. Upgradile, but also abandoned her. Like, these guys that are to be putting rings on women's fingers and elaborate earrings and beautiful wigs and coats and fur and minks and diroko and like just dieta. With all that glory even on her. She's drenched in designer apparel. That there are blizzards. It's cold in the house. It's Antarctica. He's stumbling, he's staggering around, walking in zigzags. Angamboni in 3 days. So I mean, does it even matter that I'm drenched in Gucci? Listen, it don't matter. My dad drenched my mom in designer apparel and put her in homes as he tiled from wall to wall. And yet, this solicitor, this lawyer, this advocate, this attorney created Antarctica HRT.